and it's the fuel that's going to power data centers.
Yeah. Meantime, Microsoft, another $400 million in AI cloud in Switzerland. The spending continues.
Yeah, look, I think that one of the things that Jensen Huang, Switzerland, not a friend, that's now a friend. Remember, there was this list of friends that was a very arbitrary list that Biden put out that has since now be very much rearview mirror. But I think that the reaction to NVIDIA that all that mattered was China was a shame. Because, yes, $50 billion in sales is huge for anybody, but the fact is that there's nobody else. I mean, think about this. We are now in, like, the fifth iteration of what is Jensen Huang's dominance, and all he's doing is pulling away further. And, this idea that we're in a horse race with China, well, they're right now, they're not dead last because there's only them.
Yes.
But and they're not coming up lame. But I do think that Jensen is winning, and those of us who have been to the track, going away.
Right.
So, and Nicholas Copernicus, everyone knows about him. He published this model on the solar system, and it was really controversial because at the time he said, guess what? the sun is at the center of the universe, not the Earth. And by the way, the Earth just circles around it like any other planet. Well, as you can imagine, it didn't sit too well with the establishment back then. Well, my next guest says that NVIDIA is at the hub of the AI revolution. And while it's not as controversial as Copernicus, the street seems less impressed with the company, even after that blockbuster earnings report. So let's bring in Henny & Walsh, their asset management president, CIO, Kevin Ma. Kevin, did you catch that? I said 1945, and I knew it wasn't that. So let's start with NVIDIA, because here's the interesting thing. Had the blowout quarter.
Yes.
And still, the stock is still below the, you got to go back last year. Almost all these other names have really made a much bigger move.
Yes.
What do they have to do to impress Wall Street at this point?
What NVIDIA did last week was remind investors of two things, Charles. One is that where the AI revolution is indeed alive and well, and we're just at its beginning stages, akin to batting practice of a doubleheader. And two, that they do remain at the hub of the AI ecosystem. $44 billion in revenue. $39 billion of that, though, was from data centers. So now data centers account for 88% of their total revenue. They're not just a chip play. They've diversified now and are starting to occupy the entire ecosystem, similar to what Amazon did a few years back with the e-commerce ecosystem.
I mean, it's great. No one disagrees with any of that, but the stock seems to be churning up here, seems to be having difficulty. Now, I know there's a big question mark in Jensen Huang becoming more and more involved in this sort of China situation, right?
Yes.
I read at least 3 separate articles over the last 24 hours on how the race between America and China.
Yep.
A lot of it centered on AI, a lot of it centered on NVIDIA. He would like to see us, just sell them stuff so that they don't make their own. I think that's crazy, though, because if the ultimate goal is global superiority, they're going to try their best to get it anyway.
Yep, the AI revolution is indeed a race, and both countries are now trying to gain a significant advantage in that regard. Right now, the U.S. is in front, but companies are starting to pivot. Look at NVIDIA itself. They just announced plans to build $500 billion of infrastructure in the U.S. over the next 4 years so they can build all their chips in the U.S. in places like Phoenix, Arizona, with Taiwan Semiconductor, who is right there on the upper left-hand side.
You got your list there, right? So the AI ecosystem.
Yes.
Let's talk about the semiconductors. These are the two names you like. It's interesting. Neither are an American name, right? Taiwan
That's
Semi.
right.
ASML. I mean, they do that with lithography machine. One
That's
machine
right.
is like half the size of this, the size of half this studio. You can't really knock it off, right? It's not a chip.
No.
But the stock, though, is volatile.
Yes, so I look at the AI supply chain. Know who ASML's biggest client is? Taiwan Semiconductor. They're the largest lithographer in the world. You know who Taiwan Semiconductor's biggest client is? NVIDIA. And NVIDIA doesn't manufacture its own chips. Taiwan Semiconductor does. And that Phoenix, Arizona plant that I happened to visit 2 weeks ago is enormous. Is going to take over a lot of the capacity for NVIDIA so they can meet all of these demands. Good place to invest.
Software, everyone knows Microsoft.
So I think it was the last time that I was on when you were on, you talked about NVIDIA and Jensen Huang.
Yes.
And how you have never seen anyone sort of, I don't know if it was confident or something to express confidence.
I mean, those numbers were wild.
Yes, so that was a while back.
I mean, you think about it, what is this, a $3 trillion company whose revenue grew 69%? I mean, it's unbelievable when you think about it. It's insane. So I just think the AI revolution is early. But, if God forbid there's a trade war, none of that will matter in the near term. It just won't.
Let me give you the details. We know that the Chinese desperately want, what do they want? NVIDIA's chips. That's their whole complaint. The market, again, so hopeful, sent NVIDIA stock flying on the news of potential talks. Buyers are betting that Trump will change course and allow NVIDIA to sell up to $50 billion worth of chips, to China this year alone. And China will cut us a break with our rare earth needs. The art of the deal. Yet this stance, leaked by still one more White House official, seems pretty definitive. Maybe it's all in negotiation, another hopeful view this market keeps taking. Or maybe it's over. But does anyone truly believe that this administration will give China what it wants? Hey, anything's possible. That seems a stretch to me. Even as Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, said the president has a plan. By the way, I think Jensen makes a very compelling case when he argues that we should let NVIDIA sell those chips to the Chinese, because otherwise China will indeed invest much more heavily in their own semiconductor industry. Wouldn't it be better to blunt China's efforts to leapfrog us and keep them dependent on our chips, the same way we're dependent on their rare earth minerals? Sadly, the White House says no. I think it makes a ton of sense.
Today, we learned that Microsoft is expanding their AI data center footprint in Switzerland with a $400 million investment that will include cutting-edge GPUs from NVIDIA. This week, Jensen is in Europe after he told us on the earnings call last week that there are many large-scale data center projects that have yet to be announced, and that many countries, including many European countries, are currently working on their own national AI data center projects. So be on the lookout for positive announcements out of Europe this week. And next week, we have GTC Paris with a keynote from Jensen scheduled for June 11th at 11 a.m. Central European Summer Time, which is 5 a.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. Pacific. Jensen told us on the earnings call that he will be speaking about quantum GPU computing during that keynote. NVIDIA is going to play an important role in the future of quantum computing, and I'm excited to hear what Jensen has to say on June 11th. My takeaway from NVIDIA's earnings is that the build-out of AI data centers is only increasing. NVIDIA is dominating across the entire stack. The hyperscalers are deploying on average 72,000 Blackwell GPUs per week in order to try and meet record levels of AI demand. And many people have started to realize the fact that NVIDIA is no longer just a chip company. They're taking a total system approach, and they are now the dominant AI infrastructure company. The two short-term headwinds that I think are weighing on the stock right now are the China situation and the upcoming semiconductor tariffs. I'll be honest, I thought we would have gotten the semiconductor tariffs by now, but we're still waiting on an announcement from the Commerce Department. Just last Friday, the president spoke to reporters about bringing manufacturing to the U.S., and he put a lot of emphasis on wanting to bring chip manufacturing to the U.S.
We are looking to do chips and computers and lots of other things, and tanks and chips, meaning ships. Yeah.
Which makes me think we may get the reveal of the semiconductor tariffs at some point in the near future. Be prepared for that, as I would expect NVIDIA TSMC and other semiconductor stocks to initially trade lower when we get the reveal of the semiconductor tariffs. But the important thing to remember is that this would likely just be a short-term reaction that does not negatively impact NVIDIA's long-term future. The good news is that NVIDIA and TSMC have been working together to aggressively onshore semiconductor manufacturing to the US, and TSMC is already producing NVIDIA's Blackwell in Arizona. So again, if NVIDIA stock trades lower when we get the reveal of the semiconductor tariffs, I expect it to be a short-term reaction and nothing to be concerned about over the long term. The other overhang on the stock right now is the China trade situation and export controls. NVIDIA guided for Q2 revenue of $45 billion, saying that this outlook reflects a loss in revenue from H20 sales of approximately $8 billion. In other words, NVIDIA would have guided for revenue of $53 billion if there was no restriction. It's important to keep in mind that we're talking about NVIDIA's H20, which was specifically designed for the Chinese market. And the H20 is substantially lower spec than NVIDIA's Blackwell. Jensen spoke at length about China on NVIDIA's earnings call as he made the case for why he thinks NVIDIA should be allowed to sell the H20 in China without restrictions. Be on the lookout for any developments in trade negotiations between the US and China. If we get news at some point in the coming months about the H20 restriction being lifted in China, then I would expect NVIDIA stock to trade substantially higher on that news if it happens. But regardless of whether NVIDIA is allowed to sell in China or not, I'm still bullish on the long-term future of NVIDIA. AI demand is extremely strong based on what we heard from each of the hyperscalers' earnings calls. NVLink Fusion has massive implications for NVIDIA, keeping clients within their ecosystem. This is so important because it throws the bearish argument of the hyperscalers developing their own chips and posing a threat to NVIDIA out the window. Even if another company develops a better GPU, TPU, or CPU than NVIDIA's, they're still going to rely on NVIDIA for the rest of the system, both hardware and software, to make it all run. This is why I keep showing this graphic over and over again in these videos. NVIDIA is not just a chip company anymore, they are developing entire systems. And now, with NVLink Fusion, they have cemented themselves as the dominant AI infrastructure infrastructure company. It doesn't matter anymore if another company develops a better accelerator, because that is just one component of an entire system. And NVIDIA sells the entire system. All things considered, I am very optimistic about the future of NVIDIA, and I'm especially looking forward to the second half of this year. By then, hopefully NVIDIA will have higher margins in the mid-70s. Blackwell Ultra will be ramping strong, and hopefully the initial market shock of any semiconductor tariffs will be behind us. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective, and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.